All right, the opening college football playoff rankings are out. Are the Georgia Bulldogs number one? Dean Legge, Ryan Curley, I'm going to bring in right now. Ryan, Georgia is number two behind Ohio State. Your instant reaction to that?
Not surprised. Not surprised. I thought Georgia was gonna end up being either one or two in this poll. Had a really hard time seeing the committee put them any lower than number two, and they don't. Um, resume. This is resume based. That's what this
Is
is.
that what you
I
think?
don't. I don't think it's eye test based
Why do you say that? Well, we got a little bit more
because
time.
I've
Keep
watched a
going.
lot of Ohio State. But look, as far as the resume goes, that's why they're number one. But if I think it's a little inconsistent if you go through. I mean, you could argue Florida State's resume is better than Michigan if you want to make this a resume-based thing or a wins-based thing. So it's interesting, but I'm not surprised, is my main thing. Not surprised.
So this is not nearly as egregious as last year. Last year they had Tennessee.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
last year they had Tennessee at one, which was to me just that basically was, hey, they beat Alabama. They're the number one team. Um, that can't be all we're doing, but there are the Rebels at 10, in front of Penn State, and Missouri's at 12. So I don't, Missouri is ranked two spots in front of LSU, a team that beat them by 10 on their field. But you're gonna get some of that a little bit in these things. I actually think, to me, this makes sense. I mean, I'm not sure if we want to get into this whole eye test versus resume thing. We can. My eyes saw Ohio State win on the road at Notre Dame by about an inch, and it counts. So, the Penn State win was fine. I don't think that Penn State would be within. I mean, I'm just going to say, I don't think Penn State would be within 17 of Georgia. Georgia would wear them down. And by the fourth quarter, that would be kind of the way that Ohio State beat them. I think it would be not dissimilar, if not slightly worse. So I have no respect for Penn State. I'll just say it. So but I have to say, when you compare the two teams, you have to compare them for something. And they're comparing them. I think you can make the argument that Ohio State's looked better at times than Georgia. Can you really though? Like, what game would that be? It can't always
And I
be
mean
about
they
Georgia. It
they
can't
thumped
always
the
be about
cupcake. They thumped one bad team, but
which was
other
who,
than that, I mean, none of their games they really pulled away from anyone too much.
right?
I
So I
mean,
think it can't be. It can't always be about a particular team's negatives. And like right now, I mean, I think it is completely rational. Makes plenty of sense that Ohio State would be ranked number one. I think putting Georgia at three, I could listen to that because Michigan's played so well the whole year. Um, I think though, if we're saying who's looked the best, the whole season Michigan's looked the best. After that, probably Georgia and then Ohio State. Florida State has looked the weakest of the top four, and then Washington. Listen, Washington deserves to have lost probably at least one game, if not a couple. And so, I'm not there yet with Washington either. But you know, Florida State can beat Georgia if they get hot. I think Michigan can beat Georgia. I think Ohio State can beat Georgia. Alabama can beat Georgia. Mississippi can beat Georgia. Oklahoma cannot, I don't think. There was a lot of discussion of Oregon tonight. But globally speaking, Ryan, I think I don't, it all washes out. But I thought last year was like a major red flag for Georgia and Michigan. Like those first rankings just didn't make sense to me last year. These kind of do.
yeah, look, and they did what they did it again, right? They ranked it based on similar, concepts,
It just
and
wasn't as
that being,
egregious.
have you beaten better teams? It wasn't as egregious this time because there wasn't as much room for egregious stuff to happen. Because you can look at both sides of the coin with all of the top six, and you can look at the positives and negatives because I think it is a little bit more evenly spread out.
Yeah.
Yes, at this point in time, Georgia, has stumbled a little bit more than they did last year
The
through this point.
stumbled is of course a relative
Stumbled
term.
yeah,
Yeah.
but Tennessee was fresh off of the Alabama win, and that
Yeah.
was a big deal.
But like
And
last year, let's remind everybody that they had Tennessee at 1, Ohio State at 2, Georgia at 3, Clemson at 4, which I don't even remember who Clemson played last year. That's how rough that
Michigan was
was.
5, right?
Yeah, Michigan, and then Alabama, TCU, Oregon, USC, and LSU. Um, so obviously Clemson and Tennessee both didn't go wind up to the playoff, and there's just so far away to go. But like they did the resume test with Tennessee, but then they didn't do that with Georgia and Ohio State last year. And I'm trying to remember. I mean, I just don't. That last year was for me. Do these people know what they're doing? I can't say that this year. This year is that too strong? I mean, like this year it's like, oh, okay, this is
Well,
sensible.
we were on a similar page a year ago, almost exactly a year ago to the day, I
Yeah,
guess. But we were on a similar page as far as that goes. I remember not understanding why Michigan was so low a year ago. I remember that being a big part of like, man, is this just not even close to being right? And it wasn't right.
no,
Um, I do think it was harder to rank them this year. I think it was harder to rank at this initial point. I mean,
you've
but
got
when you go down the list,
you've got 13 teams, Ryan, that are 7-1. So realistically,
it does
13.
not matter where any of those teams are ranked because
Well, I was just
that's one
gonna
of those you
say
just got to win out.
those 13
Yeah.
teams are all capable of getting into the playoff, not as the one seed like Louisville. Like let me just go off Louisville just for a second as an example. Obviously, Louisville and Florida State are not both going to play in the college football playoff. Georgia, Missouri, Alabama, and Ole Miss are not all going to play in the college football playoff. Like we know that, and those are 4 of the top 13. So there'll be one, maybe 2 SEC teams. I doubt very seriously, but it's possible that Oregon and Washington, as well as Oklahoma and Texas, could both get in. I think that's unlikely. I mean, I think Oklahoma might need another loss in November, so we'll just see. But this is a pretty wide gamut of where you're going from. But I have to say, for me, even though Florida State's played better lately, what Ohio State has accomplished and the way that Georgia and Michigan have really been solid the whole year. I mean, like, are we gonna nitpick? Like, Florida State should have lost to 4-4 Clemson. I'm just gonna tell you right now. This notion that Boston College was playing an emotional game. No disrespect to Boston College. What are you talking about? If you can't handle Boston College, you have no business being in the college football playoff. They nearly lost that game. The difference, though, Ryan, is they have won every game they've played. Will that continue? I think they will. I mean, do you think Florida's going to beat Florida State? I don't. So, you know, I just something's not going to work here at some stage. Obviously, Ohio State, Michigan, but there's going to be a lot of pom pom swaying for if Georgia and Alabama get into a situation to where they can both get in. There's going to be a lot of people wanting that. If Ohio State and Michigan can both get in, there's going to be a lot of pom pomming about that. So if I'm Florida State, I'm not comfortable at all right now. Particularly if UW gets on a hot streak. But right now, where you're at with Ohio State and Michigan both being where they're at, you're okay. But chaos is bad news for Florida State to me.
I just think I have a hard time seeing Florida State, should have lost multiple games. You can argue that they should have lost multiple games, but I kind of have a hard time seeing them not go 13-0.
Well, I
I don't
agree.
like saying that because
Yeah,
it could, Louisville or, a second.
they could lose
Could
in the
is
ACC
Duke still
championship.
alive for that? So Duke could
Well,
maybe, if they had,
Virginia Tech could play Florida State in the ACC championship. That's where we're
yeah,
at in the ACC.
it could be a good team or it could really not be a good
I
team.
know.
So I feel like I'm kind of out on that. There are a lot of possible chaos scenarios at this point in time, and that's probably the case every year around this time, just
Yeah.
because it hasn't developed as much yet. But I mean, the committee could have some real tough decisions there towards the end if Oregon barely beats Washington in a Pac-12
I think they
championship, and they're
probably
both
will.
one loss. If Michigan and Ohio State are both one loss, if
What do you? What do
Georgia
you?
loses an SEC championship or something like that, and there's two really good one-loss SEC teams, and you've got like a 12-1 Texas,
What do
and
you?
that
What
could
do you
be
make of Alabama? So, what do you make of Texas, then Alabama, then Oklahoma? I mean,
just what do I make of the way they ordered them?
yeah, because I think I was Matt and I were watching Texas OU that day, and I kept saying to him, Texas is the better team. Texas is the better team. I think in the car ride to the stadium, that was a Kentucky game. I think I said, I don't know if you remember this or not. I was like, Texas is a better team. They still lost, which it's got to matter at some point. But boy, if you're the better team, are you going to lose twice? I mean, I doubt that. Texas has just got to get to the Big 12 championship game with one loss, and they'll be okay. Texas seems like they're playing better. God, Oklahoma is not. I mean, that's
They're
bad.
not, and that's why that they're lower.
They should be.
Because
So
they do have the head-to-head over Texas, and it is a little abnormal that they're not. But Oklahoma's off of a fresh loss to a not great team, to just a team that's not that good. So that's why they're down there. I'm not surprised at all where Bama's at. You can't put Bama over Texas right now. You just can't.
no,
Um,
no, they played
that
them.
wasn't a
I mean,
close game.
why? If it doesn't matter what you do on the field, then why are we keeping score? So you had to have Texas above Oklahoma, but Texas above Alabama, but Oklahoma to that degree, you're sitting there going, well, why are they below Texas? Well, they just haven't played well, man. I mean, I
Yeah,
think that's got to matter.
and that's why Michigan's over Florida State is because if those weren't close games against Clemson and Boston College, Florida State's three,
Or
maybe two,
or one.
or one.
Yeah, I mean,
So
if Florida State doesn't goof around with, I mean, at this stage, like Georgia and Michigan are the betting favorites right now, basically the same. Florida State is number 3 in this thing for the record, and then Ohio State and Oregon, and then Alabama, and then Texas, and then UW. Like UW's not playing well either, Ryan. I mean, like I understand why these teams are like you. We watched Washington real late. I mean, they're like last week. Talking about last week when we were texting. Like, what is happening in this game? They should have lost that game at home to Arizona State. They're bad. Like, we're not having that discussion with Georgia. Like, who's Georgia should have lost to that they played? Auburn? Like, we're really going to say a 7-point win is a should have lost?
yeah, no, the statement should have lost is not the right one for
Didn't
Auburn, but Georgia did
didn't
have to
play
claw
well?
out of that.
Didn't play well? I mean, come on.
Didn't
I
play
mean,
well and had to claw out of that. But you can make the argument that Florida State should have lost multiple games. You can make the argument Washington. I mean, that was by the skin of their teeth.
well, they didn't score an offensive touchdown.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that was pretty rough. But I think all the granule, the 4-foot level is irrelevant at this stage because 40 all that matters is 40,000 feet. Are you undefeated right now? Because if you are and you're not named Air Force, you're getting the benefit of the doubt, and you should. But I don't hate this at all. I think this is
Yeah, I think they
I
did
mean I
kind of a
think
good
it's
job.
basically right. I mean if Georgia had been the 4, I'd be like, hey, I'm like, can you
The
explain?
three would have been a little much for me, man.
No, I could have understood the 3. I
I
would
would
not.
have understood why.
I
I
wouldn't
just
agree
would have
with
been
it.
like, again,
Well,
really?
I do. Let me just say this too. I think there is obviously recency bias with the college football playoff committee. They did that with Clemson. They do that with Alabama. They do that, and in 17. Georgia should have been the one, and they were the one going into the thing. And then they lost to Auburn. They wound up the 3. They wound up the 3 that year. But I think college football playoff often the committee often they have their favorites, and I think Georgia is one of their favorites. But they just missed it tremendously last year. I mean, that was really off. But if you're undefeated, it's right there for you. And the wild part about this is for Georgia, you know, right now it looks like they're going to play 3 teams in the top 12 in the next of this ranking in the next 5 weeks. I don't see anybody else that does that. Um,
No, no.
I
That's
don't
and that
see
that was
that.
my next point was it's gonna Georgia's got the toughest road from here on out.
So with to
They,
that end, if you're like thumping your chest and you're worried if it matters to you if they're the one or not, they totally have the capability to be the one. All they have to do is go undefeated. If they don't go undefeated, they might not get in. I mean, that just has to be said. I mean, I said that last year. If they lose to Tennessee, they're not getting in. If they lose this season, they might not get in. It just might not. So, and the other thing, let
I
me just spit
think they
this out
can.
too. Let me spit this out too, Ryan, which is that it will matter if you're the one this year for a couple of reasons. A, it could mean that you're playing Washington. B, it probably will mean that you're playing in New Orleans and not Los Angeles, which, I think that matters too.
So I think if you're Georgia, you can lose to Ole Miss, or you could lose to Georgia Tech,
I don't
but you
disagree.
can't
You can't lose
you
those
can't
two.
afford to lose to the other two. But a 12-1 SEC champion is in the playoff.
Yeah, whether it's Georgia or Alabama.
Whether yeah, or well, no, that's impossible
LSU's
for
a two
LSU,
loss.
but
I have to say, I mean,
LSU is in the mix still.
LSU is definitely still in the mix, but they got to run the table here, and you know, like for Florida State, they're not getting any help from the ACC. Georgia is from the SEC, and I don't know if there's a lot. I don't know if there's enough left in LSU's schedule to get them where they need to go. But we'll just see. But I basically agree with this. I mean, I think it's I totally understand putting Ohio State as the one. I don't think they're the best team in the country, but I totally understand why they're ranked number one. That's my take. Yours?
I get it. No, yeah, I'm not surprised at all. I understand why they did it, and they have a justifiable reason for doing it, if you want to put it that way. They're looking for, it's always been that argument about the four best or the four most deserving.
It should be
Well,
the four
Ohio
best.
State's the most deserving. It
It
should
should
be the four
it should
best.
be the four best. Period. I mean,
Ohio
Georgia
State is
should
the
have been in that
most
18 playoff.
deserving. So,
And probably the
yeah.
19 if we're talking about the best. But most deserving, frankly, is not the best. What is deserving? I mean, winning the ACC versus winning the Big 12. I mean, like which?
That's the problem is you can't. I mean, you can calculate it with advanced stats if you really want to, but you can't. It's not the same thing.
No, it's not.
So
And like
it's hard
and
to
Notre
it's hard
Dame
to make
can't
that.
Notre Dame can't win their conference, right? So they should not have been in that 18. They were not one of the best. Well, Oklahoma really was the problem that year.
Yeah, but
But
I I'm totally cool with 3 through. I mean, I'm just looking at it right now. 3 through 15, I think is it's. I think it's harder to rank once you get to that
well,
16 to
I mean,
25 range.
listen,
But I
LSU's
would just
better.
have Georgia and Ohio State flipped.
LSU is better than Louisville and Missouri. Um, they're probably better than Penn State, but they lost to Ole Miss, so I don't know that I could have them above 10. But I don't know. Oregon State being 16, we'll just see. Hey,
That's quite the way
fall
to. That's quite the way to exit.
little Halloween seasonal flu here, not flu, seasonal allergies going in. Didn't get enough treats tonight, Ryan. Too many ghouls and goblins. Anyway, the Dogs checking out at number 2. We'll see how this thing progresses as time goes on. Thanks for watching.